Thank you for joining us here on Down the Garden Path, where each week we discuss down-to-earth tips and advice for your plants, gardens, and landscapes. As landscape designers and gardeners, we think it is important and possible to have great gardens that are low maintenance, and we want to help you make it happen. I am Joanne Shaw, landscape designer and owner of Down to Earth Landscape Design for the past 11 years. It is currently a design-only business here east of the GTA. With me is my co-host, Matthew Dressing.
Good evening, everyone.
Sorting out technical difficulties on the fly. Welcome, Matthew.
Welcome, Joanne. Welcome. So I'm Matthew Dressing, horticulturist and landscape designer and owner of Natural Affinity Designs. Natural Affinity is a landscape design and garden maintenance firm servicing Toronto and the eastern GTA. Joanne and I enjoy doing Down the Garden Path each week, bringing you interesting, relevant, and helpful topics to help you achieve a great garden. We learn right along with you from each other, from our research, and from the guests that join us here on the show. As always, we welcome your questions via social media and emails.
That's right. Or they can even call today. Yes. Right? Because our guest is in the studio. So that is great. And we'll rehash those phone numbers in a minute. So we want to thank you once again for joining us here. And remember that you can always check past shows. If you just go to your favorite podcast app and search for Down the Garden Path, we've got all our past shows that we once were done here, we release as podcasts. And once you're there, while you're there, please feel free to comment, like, or subscribe. So we're excited. We're kind of doing double duty today, so bear with us, everybody. We are live on the radio at the same time as we are live on Facebook. We're excited because fall is in the air.
Fall is in the air. It's getting cooler.
Mm-hmm.
It's that sweater weather teasing us, but September
is.
might get a little warmer. But it is time for the fall harvest and warm sweaters and night fires and traditional apple picking season is upon us.
That's right.
So with us this evening, our guest, Susan Poizner from orchardpeople.com is here to talk all about apples, and more specifically, I think a little bit of the history of the apples, some of the different varieties you may be able to find and order for next year.
Or think outside the box and not just the typical apple.
Exactly.
Right?
And talk to us about a few exotic apple varieties that are worth trying and taking a look at. So,
that's right.
Thank you, Susan, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. This is lots of fun.
Yeah, this is great. And so bear with us. We know everybody you're listening on the radio or on the computer, as well as watching us on Facebook Live. So you get to see what happens during a show, right?
Which I think is really cool.
Yes.
You know, people get to see the inside story.
That's right. That's right. And Susan, if our listeners aren't familiar, Susan, you have your own show on this studio.
I do. It's on Tuesday, the last Tuesday of every month. It's called the Urban Forestry Radio Show and Podcast.
Excellent.
So I have lots of fun, and I explore topics relating to fruit trees, food forests, permaculture, and arboriculture.
Wonderful. So
cool.
So everybody, last Tuesday on Reality Radio 101. So there's your own little mini commercial.
Very nice. Do I have to pay for that, guys?
No.
Because that's expensive.
I know. And that's why she feels so familiar or so comfortable and relaxed in our studio. And Susan's also the expert with Facebook Live. Matt and I have been shy about doing it, or I'll confess I've been more shy about doing it. So so this is fun.
So if you're listening live and if you're watching on Facebook Live, don't forget to write us at instudio101@gmail.com and get in touch with Susan. Ask any of your fruit tree questions. Susan was very graceful.
Everybody.
Thank you,
there
Vanna.
we go, Facebook Live, everybody.
Oh, you got the glare there. You can take it right out. But we do have, for people who write in questions, we do have copies of Susan's book, Growing Urban Orchards, The Ups, Downs, and How-Tos of Fruit Tree Care in the City. So if you write in, 2 lucky listeners will be entered. Everyone who writes in will be entered into the draw. And at the end of the show, we'll draw 2 lucky listeners to win a copy of the book. So again, just instudio101@gmail.com. And that will get you entered into the show or into the draw.
Excellent. Excellent. So we're all familiar with apple picking. We probably all have done it as children, right? Up into, or whenever we stopped going with our parents. But Susan, do you want to start us off with a little bit of history about apples?
Yeah, I do want to talk about history about apples because I'll be honest with you, I can get very frustrated going to the supermarket to see the same, 5 varieties over and over again. Okay, so what do you see, guys?
Gala,
Yeah.
Yep. Red Delicious.
Red Delicious.
Golden,
Delicious.
Yeah. Granny Smith.
Granny Smith, Honeycrisp,
Macintosh.
Macintosh.
Empire.
Empire. If you've got a good shop, they'll go a little bit outside the box,
yes,
you know.
for sure.
But honestly, in the 1850s, there were literally thousands of different apple tree cultivars in North America. Literally thousands.
Oh my goodness.
And the thing about apples is apples have incredible genetic biodiversity. So apples can taste so different. Like, for instance, there's a beautiful old cultivar called the winter banana apple.
Oh my goodness, really?
And it doesn't look like a banana. It's an apple, but it has a slightly banana type flavor to it. Because apples are so genetically diverse, like us humans, like Joanne, if you had 7 children, each child, oh my God, that's a lot of kids, right? Each child would be very different looking with different personality traits.
I have 2 and they are very different.
They're very different. So it's the same with apples. There is a great natural genetic biodiversity. So how is it then that we go to the supermarket and get, you can have an endless choice of Red Delicious apples. They will always taste exactly the same.
Right. Yeah, that seems concerning that they, regardless of where you are in North America, it tastes the same.
It tastes the same. Why?
The lack of biodiversity of the apples that we're growing.
Well, and how do they make them taste the same?
Yeah.
They graft them.
Okay.
So every single Red Delicious apple is either a cutting, when it probably isn't today. It would either be a cutting from the very first red tree that produced the Red Delicious apples, or a cutting from one of its children or progeny, trees, right? So basically what happens is, if I have a tree in my backyard and it's producing really, really yummy fruit, and I'm thinking, I want to make my million here, I'm going to call it the Susan Poizner apple. It's going to be a big hit. I will cut pieces off of my tree. I will graft them onto rootstock, create little Franken trees, and plant them all over the world. I'll sell them for a lot of money, and you guys will be my first 2 customers for the Susan Poizner apple tree. And I'll make my millions because the apple will be so delicious. So that's how we have all these apples that taste exactly the same. They are genetically cloned.
Okay. So someone else has determined what tastes better than something else.
Exactly. So this is why I wanted to talk a little with you guys about history, because I've been having so much fun learning about the history of apples being grown in North America. So where did Red Delicious come from? Here's an interesting story. I recently went to the Stark Brothers Nursery in the United States. It is one of the biggest mail-order fruit tree nurseries.
Okay.
And their company has been around for 200 years.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
So that's a long time. The longest operating fruit tree nursery in the world.
It shows you how old fruit trees are.
Yeah, fruit trees are pretty old. Back to the Garden of Eden, right? They're old, right? Yeah. So basically, Stark Brothers, at one point, there was an apple called Ben Davis in the 1800s, and it was 1830s. That was the popular apple, and because it was hardy for American climate.
Okay.
It was easy to ship. It was a nice hard apple. And the one problem was it didn't taste very good.
Oh.
So this Stark Brothers, Clarence Stark, one of the Stark brothers in the Stark Brothers nursery, he said, look, I got to get people to diversify, but I can't tell them not to plant Ben Davis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a new apple that tastes delicious. That's really good. He started a contest, and he sent it out to all the growers and said, send me an apple from your orchard. It could be a seedling apple, like something that just grew from seed out in the orchard. If it tastes really great, send it to me. So one guy wrote in and he said, I got a good apple. Here it is. So Clarence tasted this apple. He said, oh my goodness, it is delicious. And he probably, for $100 or $2, said, hey, let me buy the rights for that apple.
Oh, yeah. If that back then,
If that, right? A couple $100, give me the apple. He got his cuttings. He sold them out. Stark Brothers, he was very entrepreneurial, very good at marketing. And he sold those apples far and wide. They were in an interesting color, an interesting shape. Now, today, if you bite into a red delicious apple, they don't really taste that good. They're kind of mushy.
Yeah, not my favorite.
Not my
Yeah.
favorite.
No.
Yeah. Well, they tasted better then. It's from fiddling over all these years to make them more red and more pretty and
Yes.
more shiny. And while
Thicker skin,
yeah,
right?
thicker
That thick
skin,
skin that
easier to
gets stuck in our
ship.
teeth.
Yeah.
So, as time went on, the quality and the taste went wrong, but people didn't know that. It's like Red Delicious is the one to buy. It was the most, and it still is probably the most popular apple for about 50 years. Top
Really?
apple.
Really? Wow. And wow.
Wow.
You think I hear of a
Yeah.
Honeycrisp and
Yes,
the Macintosh and all
and
these
I
other
wanted
names.
to ask
I'm
about the
surprised.
Honeycrisp too, because that's a newer cultivar, is that not?
So Honeycrisp is much newer. So when I first tasted, I grew up with Red Delicious apples.
Yes.
Yeah, that
we
was
all
my
did.
favorite growing up.
Yeah.
Well,
for sure.
it wasn't my favorite. I didn't like them even then. My mother put it in my lunch every single day with my sandwich and my juice. And I remember once
Brown paper bag.
I took a bite.
Yeah.
I thought this is kind of mushy. Probably the skin got caught in my teeth.
Yeah.
And from then on, I didn't bother telling my mom, but I just threw them in the garbage. I'm so sorry, guys. I feel really bad.
I know.
Does that make me a bad person?
No, I don't think so. I'm sure there's lots of other kids out there that have done that their whole lives too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So for me, I never really thought I liked apples until, I don't know, 10 years ago or something.
Okay.
I went to a farmer's market with a friend and she bought a bunch of these new kind of apples and she said, "Here, try one." And it was this crispy, crunchy, sweet. It's like candy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I like this. And it was a Honeycrisp. So that's a newer development.
Okay.
So basically, in the old days, in the 1800s, most of the new cultivars were, just chance discoveries
Right.
where you had your orchard of Ben Davis, let's say, and some pollen drifted over to pollinate your tree from another tree in the neighborhood. And then somehow the seed that ended up becoming the new tree had a genetically different basis to it. It was not one of these clone trees. It was its own thing. And you picked a fruit from the tree and you thought, oh, this is quite tasty. Chances are, by the way, if you were to take the seeds from a
Right.
Honeycrisp apple and plant them, like 100 seeds from this all different Honeycrisp apples, all Honeycrisp,
Right.
each one would be a different type of fruit. And probably 99 out of 100 would be terrible tasting fruit.
So it's not an exact.
It's not an exact science.
Yes. Okay.
By the time they came around with Honeycrisp, there are tinkerers who started to develop and have fun and take pollen from this apple and then put it on that blossom and see what they get. And then they develop things like the Honeycrisp.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yes, and they're doing that at the University of Minnesota.
Oh, all over the place.
All over the place now. Okay,
All
because
over
I've
the
seen
place.
it. I've been to the Arboretum in Minnesota, and they had the kind of like a test orchard there. So
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So
Um,
here's what
Are they still trying to invent new ones?
Oh my God, yes.
Okay, so there's
And-
still money in doing that.
Oh, there is a lot of money. Now,
Interesting, everybody.
So here's my pet peeve. Do we want the 5 apples that the big companies want to market to us, or do we want to break outside that, step outside the box?
Right.
So here I'm showing for Facebook Live. This is beautiful. This is one of the
beautiful
old
artwork.
fruit tree catalogs
They almost look like
from the
cherries,
days
don't
of
they?
old, right?
Yeah.
Is that beautiful or what?
It is very nice.
So in the old days, the way these fruit tree nurseries, now what year is that from? 12 or something?
1912.
Yeah. That's from 1912. So in the old days, how the nurseries competed was they would create catalogs like this, and you see literally dozens of different apple cultivars. So,
Okay.
have a look and look at the apple section and see what you find. But these are cultivars we're not getting in our supermarket, but some of them we can get from specialist fruit tree nurseries.
Okay. And what about farmers markets?
Now, farmers markets, yeah, there is more diversity.
Okay.
You can get some cool ones. I like going apple picking at certain orchards where I know they have different cultivars. Like one is Avalon Orchard in Ontario.
Okay.
And she specializes in disease-resistant fruit trees. So these trees have been developed to be easier to grow
Okay.
organically for sure.
Okay.
So
All right. So you're saying too, so everybody who thinks about getting apples, they're going to the grocery store or their farmer's market. But as a homeowner, we can grow apple trees as well. And they're not necessarily the big, massive apple trees that we remember from childhood.
Well, and that's the other thing.
Okay.
So you don't have to, like you say, when you're looking at your garden and you're designing gardens for people, and you look and think, okay, it's got full sun, but they want other stuff. They don't just want an apple tree. And
Right.
you know that it's going to get so big. And if you give them a design which has an apple tree in the middle, there's no room for any other plants.
Right.
It's not like that anymore.
Okay.
You can get dwarfing trees. You can get trees that are semi-dwarf and prune them to keep them small.
Okay.
And so this is just one of many fruit tree nurseries where you
Okay.
can order these interesting cultivars.
So Silver Creek Nursery.
That's Silver Creek. There are lots of them. There's Whiffle Tree. There's all sorts. So, for instance, here's one that he carries at Stokes Red. That's a cider apple, okay?
Okay.
So it says it's a vintage, bitter, sharp English cider apple. Aromatic juice, medium acid, high tannin. Originated in Somerset around 1920. Heavy cropper, resistant to scab. And it says Zone 4, harvest mid-October. So, I mean, that's just one of lots of different.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Because
Yeah.
at our typical, like our local garden centers, if people want an apple tree, are they then only able to find?
So here's the problem. When I first got started as an orchardist, I have a community orchard in Toronto that I am in charge of. I was really interested in encouraging my local nursery to carry some disease-resistant fruit trees. They are easier to grow, but they're cultivars that these guys hadn't heard of. So they said, you know what? We can't take a cultivar that people haven't heard of because they'll never order them.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, you can understand that to a certain degree.
Yeah. So the problem is that they're only going to carry the ones that we get in the supermarket. And the problems with the ones in the supermarket is A, we're bored of them, and B, they're hard to grow because they need to be grown with harsh pesticides and fungicides, and so you're not going to do organic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a vicious circle from that standpoint, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So if we go to the outside of our local growers, then that opens up a whole...
Exactly.
Excellent.
So on my website, orchardpeople.com, if you just put in, or if you Google Orchard People fruit tree nursery list,
Okay.
it pops up a list of some 50 nurseries across North America where you can order fruit trees that will be sent to you in the early spring for planting. They'll be sent bare root.
Mm-hmm.
So not in a pot, so they're easy to send. You can get them from further afield than just,
Yes.
locally.
Yeah.
And you'll have a huge selection to choose from. You can have so much. Here's another one. One of my favorites of the old cultivars is called Wealthy.
Ooh.
Okay, Wealthy apple. This apple originated in Minnesota in the 1860s. Wealthy makes splendid applesauce, but is also good for fresh eating. It bears early, it's scab resistant and cold hardy, and it makes an excellent pollinator for other apples. It's well suited for organic orchards.
Excellent. So as homeowners, we want to really focus on that, right? Having organic and not having to worry about the spraying and the pesticides and all of. And here in Ontario, they're banned even, aren't they? Like, even
you really don't.
We
You don't
don't
want to
have
go
them.
there. You don't want to
Yes.
have to be planting a tree that you cannot actively care for. So part of what I do at orchardpeople.com is I offer fruit tree care courses for people because, to be honest, I don't even encourage people to plant apple trees or fruit trees unless they have just the basic knowledge of how to prune them properly, how to feed them, and that kind of stuff, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's just a messy endeavor.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, knowledge is power in that situation because
Yeah.
you're wasting your time, your money, or like your weekends of, there a lot of work. And I think what we find on our show is everybody wants low maintenance.
Right.
And which is why we do our show is to help you with your maintenance, but there's no such thing as no maintenance. But certainly starting organic, and as we've talked about with the lawn and the garden and our mulches and our grass fertilizers, that type of thing, it also carries, and choosing to do organic, it also goes across right to fruit trees.
But here's the bonus, guys. The bonus is that if you have a fruit tree, like a beautiful apple tree,
Okay.
you get lots of beautiful apples, that you can make your apple pies, that you have this feeling of accomplishment. You can share them with your neighbors and your community. And apples are like a real food. Like there's lots to them, right?
Yes.
You think like, and we're going to have an apple tasting here today. And I hold that apple in my hand and I think, I grew this thing. I grew this and it's feeding me.
Yeah.
So it's a sacrifice in the sense that you have to learn some skills. You have to actively care for your tree. It's not tons, but you have to do what you have to do. But then the reward is so delicious.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Now, I have to say, I didn't tell you this before the show, but my in-laws are actually avid apple hunters, I want to call them. So I just texted them and said, because they will travel wide and far to find certain apples in the season, because they don't want the Red Delicious and they don't want what our local growers. So Ambrosia, Silken, Tolman, and Tolman Sweet.
That's their favorites?
That's their favorites.
That's interesting. So
Isn't that
on this
interesting?
coming weekend,
Okay.
There's a great event in my orchard park. That's in Toronto. It's called the Ben Nobleman Park Community Orchard. Okay. And if people want to learn about it and go to it, they can go to communityorchard.ca.
Okay.
communityorchard.ca, and it'll take you to the ad for the event where I'm doing orchard tours, but there's also apple tastings.
Excellent.
And amongst their apples, wasn't Silken one of them?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be doing some Silken tasting.
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
you'll be able to compare Silken we've got Macintosh and Honeycrisp, Silken. There's another unusual one. Let's see if I can find if I wrote it down. And then there's 2 more. So you'll have 5 apples to taste.
Excellent.
And then we'll have people vote for their favorite.
Okay. Well, that is great.
So just as we reach the bottom of the hour, don't forget, everyone, we're here with Susan Poizner of orchardpeople.com. We are talking the history of apples and some more exotic apples that you can find out there. There's a world of flavors and textures and things that are just going to blow your taste buds away. So we are also having a giveaway for Susan Poizner's book, Growing Urban Orchards, the ups and downs and how-tos of fruit tree care in the city. So if you would like to write us any questions, say hi, tell us your favorite apple.
That's right, your favorite.
Yeah.
And for our listeners who are listening live, you can also look for us live on Orchard People's Facebook page. We are also doing a Facebook Live.
That's right.
Yeah.
So write in instudio101@gmail.com. Tell us your favorite apple. Share some apple stories. Say hi to our guest, Susan Poizner. And every people who write in will get entered into the draw.
That's right. And if you are growing apples, I'd love to hear from other people that are actually growing apples.
Yeah. Are you growing any exotic varieties or different varieties that aren't the classic 5 we all see in the grocery stores?
Yeah.
Or even to hear people's stories of going to the garden center and what was the selection that they had to choose from, and what was their thought process when they chose an apple tree to plant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, those are great options. And I know we within our family, we often do those tastings when my parents have the different samples of different apples. And you're right. It's not like a berry. There's, you can do so much with an apple, and it's packable. It's you can go from sauce to pies to just as a snack.
Well, think about it. In the olden days, what did they say? An apple a day keeps the doctor away. That was before they talked about superfoods, all that stuff, chia seeds that you have to bring from far away, bone broth, all that stuff that's our superfoods. But apples are amongst the original superfoods. This package of nutrition you can take with you and go on the road. Yeah,
it does come with its own packaging, doesn't it? But although that's the one thing we probably all agree we don't like about the common Red Delicious one, right?
Yeah,
is the skin. Yes. The skin. And yet not all of them will have that, right? Like they're bred in different ways.
Yeah.
So that apple on the table. So in Ben Nobleman Park Community Orchard, we have a whole bunch of different fruit trees. We got all different types. And amongst them are apple trees. That is a cultivar or variety called pristine apple.
Okay.
This is an apple that ripens in early... Oh, we got some questions on there? So the pristine apple ripens in sort of late August, actually. It's quite an early apple. Now, the problem that we have in our orchard is we do get our cherries. We get to eat them. We usually get our apricots, so get our plums. The apples, because they are harvested later, people notice them. And they're like, oh, what's this? And they pick one off and it's not ripe, and then they eat it or they throw it away or do whatever. So we hardly ever get apples that we can harvest because people plunder the tree first.
Really?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a really sad thing.
And I'm sure you've tried signage and all that.
You know what? This is the first year we put up signage, not right on that tree. We have general big signs saying this is the rules of the orchard. People don't always really look.
Yeah.
So that's kind of sad. But anywho, while I was away this year, there was a little harvest of our pristine apple for what was left. And if you pick up that apple, you'll see that it's in a sock.
So
first, do you want to show everybody?
Okay.
That's an apple in a sock. We use orchard socks. We put it on when the apple is really small, like just about the size of a quarter.
Real? Oh, so you did that? Like you did that when it was tiny?
When it was tiny, we tied the sock on there.
Oh, my goodness.
And it stops insects from laying their eggs under the skin of the fruit.
Wow.
So as the fruit grows, it fills out the sock.
Okay, I think we've just surpassed low maintenance, Susan, but okay.
I'm sorry. It's true. This
But
is what you
successful.
get. You get your children to do this.
That's right.
And
That's
also,
right.
you've pruned your tree to keep it nice and compact. This is a children's job.
Excellent. Yeah, and very doable.
Okay, so now it's harvest time. You harvest the fruit. Now you can unwrap it from its little natural packaging.
Oh, my goodness.
Little nylon socket. Orchard socks, it's called.
Is it really?
Yeah, orchard
They're
socks.
a thing.
They're a thing.
And where would our listeners go to get apple socks?
Yeah, so the orchard socks are sold at
Or
Whiffle
orchard
Tree Nursery in
Okay.
Ontario. They sell them. I used to sell them. I don't sell them anymore. Too much bother. But anyways, Whiffle Tree Nursery is always selling them. They do very well. Look at this.
No.
You can't open it.
I can't. No, I don't know why I can't.
So what happened during this harvest time, so my colleagues, they harvested the apples and they saved a really beautiful one for me. It has been sitting in the fridge.
It's a trick apple.
It's a trick apple. We may have to get a little knife or key or something to rip it open.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're going to have a little apple tasting if we ever manage to unwrap our
That's
apple.
right. We're still unwrapping. I just can't believe that, but what a great concept.
Yeah.
Who thought of that?
Yeah.
So silky.
It's
But the fact that it went on a tiny little apple and then the apple could still
Yeah.
grow.
Yep. And the apple still grows. It's essentially a little nylon socket, the same kind of thing that you get when you go to the shoe store.
That's right.
Right?
Okay.
Very
Okay.
cool.
So now there's an apple slicer there.
Okay.
Okay. So I think should be, let's do that thing.
All right. I'm going to stand
Okay,
up.
and if people
Ready?
come to the park, to Ben Nobleman Park this weekend, hopefully we won't knock over the table.
Nope.
Oh, no, not good inside. Oh,
That's
damn.
okay. Half of it is, though. So
Okay, so we'll
half
taste
of
the
it
half
is.
that's good. Where
Yep.
did that thing get in? Oh, man.
I
Okay,
know.
orchard socks did not work in this particular occasion.
Mhm.
Is it?
Okay.
Let's see.
Yep. So
Okay, so
these
there's some good
yeah,
pieces.
there's some
Okay.
good pieces.
So everybody gets a taste of their
Excellent.
pristine apple.
While
And
we're
see-
munching apples, everybody, please send us in your questions about apple growing or apples.
Nice and sweet.
It smells like a normal apple. Nice texture. I can hear you guys crunching, so it's got to be crispy.
Okay, tell me if you see a flavor in this one. Let's see if I can find the description for pristine here. Apple
It's funny. It
tree.
tastes fresh to me.
It's very fresh tasting.
I don't know. If
I
there's-
find vanilla. I find a little vanilla flavor in it. Do you guys sense that, or is there somewhere? Let's see if he's got it here. Pristine. Okay, guys, you ready?
Mhm.
Pristine apple, introduced in 1994 in the U.S. It is very productive and a good keeper for an early apple. Often early harvested apples are not good keepers.
Oh,
So they don't keep in the fridge for very long.
Okay.
Yellow gold color with white flesh, has a sharp flavor and is good for fresh eating. Harvest early in the season, resistant to apple scab.
Okay.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
It is. It's nice and juicy, and it does have a sharp taste, but without being just like really bitter and like it's
And
very
so it
delicious.
does have a
It's
little
very
bit of
fresh.
tartness.
Yeah,
It does,
does.
but just the right amount.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for people who come to the park this weekend, we'll do some more apple tastings, and but there's just such a wide selection, and I really highly recommend people trying the different things that are out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for people who want to grow it, do you have some advice for people that do want to add one or two maybe to their yard? Yeah.
I'm crunching.
She's crunching. Yeah. So because I not because of the poor selection, sorry, get this out, at our local nurseries and the wider variation of varieties that are available at the wholesale nursery or mail order nurseries, that I think people don't think about that because they think, who's going to buy a tree mail order, right? Do you think about that? But you do, you can.
You can, and there's so many advantages to doing so.
Excellent.
Interestingly, when you plant an apple tree that's put in a pot, like you get at most garden centers, they take longer to adjust to their new environment because they're used to this cushy little soil pot that they're in with all the fancy soil they're in. Then you put them in your garden with your soil and they're like, ew, I don't know if we want to be here, right? But if you take all that soil away and send these trees bare root while they're dormant, they're not, no leaves, no fruit, no flowers, right? You plant them right away. They actually adjust better to the new environment. They will grow quicker. So definitely my first piece of advice, get a specialist tree from a specialist fruit tree nursery.
Okay.
Second piece of advice is research really carefully because, you can see on these nursery lists, like you can get trees of different sizes. You can get a dwarf version. You can get a semi-dwarf. So think about how big is my yard? Do I have room for a full-size tree? Think about how big it'll be when it grows full size.
And can you give us the range? Like what size would a dwarf tree be?
A dwarf tree will grow, maybe, it depends which rootstock it's on. It could be 8 feet tall. It could be 10 feet tall. It'll be pretty small.
Okay.
Yep. So, yeah.
Semi-dwarf?
Semi-dwarf will go up to 12, 14 feet.
Okay.
Even a semi-dwarf tree, if you are pruning it once a year correctly, you can keep it compact.
Okay.
So it will fit in a lot of, gardens.
Yeah, typical. So you're saying by compact, you're saying like about 8 feet?
You can keep it, I'd say 10 feet. You can take a semi-dwarf. They're stronger in a way than the dwarf trees. Sometimes the dwarf trees need to be staked.
Okay.
That's a real fuss.
Yeah, they're a little wimpy.
And if you have a dwarf tree and your kid is playing, football in the backyard or something, then... Yeah, it's going to knock down your dwarf tree. The wood will break. Semi-dwarf is a tough little guy, right? Okay. But you have to do correct pruning at the right time of year in order to keep it compact. Again, it's a skill you learn. It's not rocket science. It's fun. Okay. Yeah.
And then your regular trees, is that what we'd call them? What would we call them?
The full-size trees are called standards.
Okay.
With apples, I would not go for them, and often they're not even sold anymore. Okay. Who can deal with a 3-story apple tree? Like, who wants that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know at our nursery, it's all mostly semi-dwarf trees with the odd... I guess it's not labeled semi-dwarf. I don't know if it's a standard one.
It might be.
It might still be a semi-dwarf one, but
for
the most part.
Yeah, it might be. They will have on the label. If you do want to get it from a garden center, read the label carefully. Stay away from Macintosh. Stay away from, Honeycrisp is the hardest one to grow. Do not buy Honeycrisp apple trees.
Oh, really?
Please don't.
Okay.
So just for those people who are like, maybe they already have one and they have difficulties?
Sorry.
No, but what makes it super hard to do?
They're fiddly. They are fiddly. The fruit doesn't keep very well. There's certain diseases that they get. They also often don't bear very quickly. So people wait and it's like, okay, 7 years. When are we going to get some fruit on this thing?
Yeah.
Right.
So I've heard a lot of reports of that. So those ones are fiddly. I haven't grown one myself, but I have heard people get stressed out.
Okay. And so your regular, one that you do suggest, how quickly will it fruit?
Yeah, well, I always tell people to take the fruit, gently remove it for the first 2 years. You plant your tree. It may produce fruit. Please don't let it fruit. Let it take its energy and expand its root system and grow branches. It's like taking a little child and forcing it to serve you, know.
Yeah.
Let it mature. And for 2 years, you'll remove the baby fruit. After 2 years, you will remove some of the baby fruit. You will allow it to bear, but think in terms of if I've got a really skinny, weak branch, I don't want that branch to break with 10 apples on it.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'll thin the baby apples so that there's maybe 2 apples on the branch.
Okay.
Not low maintenance. You have to do the work there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've established that any vegetable, any growing our food there's still work involved.
Yeah.
Right? That's why being a farmer is a hard job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is work involved. The question is the rewards.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like growing fruit trees has changed me as a person. I feel like I don't look at the tree anymore like in an entitled way. Like it's your job to serve me and give me food and I don't need to give you anything back.
Mm-hmm.
I see it kind of like a two-way relationship. I give to the tree and the tree gives back to me, but like tenfold.
Okay.
They're so generous, but it's like a pet. Like all they need is love, and then they'll give you so much love back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? So it's a relationship. It's a relationship that will last a long, long time.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so we've talked about a little bit about pruning, and you were talking about some techniques about removing the apples. Is that covered in our Growing Urban Orchards?
Yes, in Growing Urban Orchards, that book covers pretty much everything.
Okay.
I also have an online course that you get more detail, but it teaches you how to prune a young tree. It teaches you how to care the tree, and it tells you the story of our orchard. And how we planted it and all the mistakes we made and what we learned from the mistakes. And my goal in writing the book is like, okay, I made so many mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Why should others have to do the same thing? Let me just tell them a funny story, entertain them. But by the end of the book, they'll say, oh, I know what to do now.
Right.
Okay.
And so if people are interested in your course, we can go to...
They go to orchardpeople.com/workshops.
Okay.
So a lot of people who take my course, you know, they might be arborists, they might be gardeners, they might be home growers.
Right.
And again, I was a filmmaker, so I make it in a fun and storytelling and entertaining way because I don't want people to feel like they're sitting back in school and learning. I want them to have fun and learn.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. So is it safe to say that when you're choosing where to buy them, like our nurseries, should you, and we have listeners from US and Canada and kind of potentially all over the world. So is it important to find a mail order company that's near you? Like as far as, is that a better thing to do or is it better to look for just the tree you want?
I think you do your research. So, for instance, here in Canada, we can't get fruit trees from the United States.
Okay, that was my other. Okay,
so in my fruit tree nursery resource list at orchardpeople.com, I give you both American and Canadian ones. So we in Canada, we can select from a whole bunch of Canadian ones. I've ordered trees from Saskatchewan and Alberta, sent to me. But also there's quite a few places in Ontario, in Quebec, and the same thing in the States. You can go and get it from another state as long as they have the one you want. And again, the key is do your research. So if I were to order a lemon or orange tree to plant in my backyard here in Toronto, how do you think I'd do with that?
Not so good.
Not so good. Right?
Although if you talk to Steve, but not in our garden, right?
Not in the outdoor garden. If you're growing it inside, you'll be good.
Yes.
But not in the garden. So, you know, lemon trees, orange trees, they call for a different climate. So you need to know your climate zone. You need to know quite a few things about pollination. So here's another problem that people do sometimes. They'll order a plum tree and they're like so excited. And then they plant the tree and they wait and they never get any plums. What's the problem?
Nothing's pollinate. You need another plum tree.
Yeah, often they're cross-pollinating trees. They're not self-pollinating, so they need a partner tree that is a different variety planted nearby so the bees can go from one to the other.
Right.
And let's say you've got two trees, right? You've got two plum trees, you made a plan, but they flower at different times.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So the answer is you don't get fruit, or unless you hire time-traveling bees that can go back and forth through time to pollinate those trees successfully.
And stay tuned. Next week, we're talking about time-traveling bees.
Yes, excellent. Good. Oh, I can't wait to hear that one.
Oh, now... from my days at working at the garden center, which is going back now, they were starting to introduce a lot of trees which were multiple fruit on the same tree.
Right.
Now what has come of that?
Yeah, and they still are. They're still, you can get your 3, 4, 5-in-1 apples. Okay. And they're all semi-dwarfs grafted to one rootstock. And you basically get the different apples. And the idea is that you don't have to plant that second cross-pollinating tree. That one tree takes up so much space and pollinates itself.
Okay.
So,
right.
What do you
there are pros
think?
and cons.
Right.
So the pros are you don't have to worry about having a partner tree.
Right.
And if you've got a small yard and you guys maybe have a client, let's say they want cherries and you don't want to give them 2 big sweet cherry trees. So you say, hey, I'll get a dwarf tree, 5 different types of cherries. They'll have a blast. Right? And that's possible and that's really good. My problem with it, and I'm a little fussy, is I like to grow easy to grow cultivars. So when they do the multi-graft trees, I bet the apple tree, you go to work tomorrow and you'll find out. I bet you the apple tree, for instance, will have Macintosh, Honeycrisp, Golden Delicious, and Gala. All the trees we get in the supermarket, which are not easy to grow.
Okay.
As I picture myself looking at the tags, because people, what's on this one? And you have to look at all the individual tags. Yeah, I think you're pretty much right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the same thing. So I would rather pick my cultivar carefully, increase biodiversity out there in the world, be creating these amazing apples that nobody else can taste anywhere else.
Yeah.
Impressing friends and family. Right?
Yeah.
And the same thing with the multi-cherry. You're going to have a bunch of common cherry varieties. It might be very nice indeed, but I prefer to do the real thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Very cool.
So, so nobody's writing in questions. So I'm sure they're all taking.
You guys are really shy today.
They're
What's up
very
with
shy,
that?
but I'm guessing. Hopefully Gary's paying attention to the computer screen. There maybe there's like
Dear,
a whole
maybe there
bunch
were
of questions.
questions.
Maybe there are questions.
I think.
Well, no. What's the
teasing you.
question? What's
No,
the
no,
question?
no.
What's the
No, we're
question?
trying to. I think Gary's gone to sleep in there.
No, you got lots of listeners. They're just not writing in.
What are they
Yes.
so shy about? But are there may be questions, perhaps, on Facebook Live. I'm seeing little bubbles there.
Yeah,
but
so
guys,
let's take those people to win the book as well, right?
Oh
Yeah,
yes, we
but-
could. We'll because I forget as I go close up to the screen that I need my glasses. So Matthew,
So Matt will do it.
Matt will do it.
Yeah, guys. Yeah, Matt will do it, and we hope that somebody can read. Something's popping up. That's not a question.
Yeah, that's not a question.
Yeah. So,
but I'm sure everybody's taking notes and checking out your website at orchardpeople.com with your courses. I know I did post this to the Garden Ontario and the Ontario Gardeners Facebook groups, so I'm hoping they can listen in as well and learn more about it. And there's often when I'm in those Facebook groups, I don't know if you go into them very often, I kind of pop in and out, or I see people post questions. And anytime people post questions about fruit trees, I'm sending them to you.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Here, send them over to Susan.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. Because, I think a lot of people, there's lot of misconceptions, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of old practices that just
Yeah.
don't work anymore, and a lot of wives' tales. So I just like to just direct someone who's current and you know what's best.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't feel like I'm a big expert, but I know more than most people because I've made every single mistake in the book.
Right. Okay.
So if you're calling me up with a mistake, it's like, oh, I did that one. Here's how not to do it.
Yes.
So there's some other things that I don't know if a lot of your listeners are local, if they live in the GTA.
Most do, but we do have listeners from all over. Then people write in on regular other shows. They're from all over Ontario and Canada. So
Yeah.
So there's another event. I don't know if you guys ever go to the Brickworks.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
So there is an event it's coming up at the Brickworks. Let's see. It's on September 28th.
Excellent.
And I think it's like an apple day. Like the whole day is about apples and stuff like that. I will be there talking between 11 and 12 noon. And there's a whole panel talking about food security in growing and harvesting fruit trees in the city.
Excellent.
So that's something people might consider going to, but there's something that's also cool.
Okay.
And I think it's the next day. Did I put a date on here? I hope so. Ooh, I don't know. Small Arms Inspection Building. This is in Mississauga, Ontario, the Small Arms Inspection Building. They're going to have a historic apple tasting.
Ooh.
So these are apple cultivars that, are being grown in Ontario, but you just aren't going to get anywhere else.
Okay.
So if you go and Google the Small Arms Inspection Building, you'll find out when it is. I think it's on September the 29th.
Excellent. And September is apple picking season,
And it's apple
right?
picking season. It's only just beginning. We're a little slow this year,
Okay.
2 weeks slow.
But you said your orchard in the city is done?
We're done.
You're done.
But we're done not because the apples were allowed to ripen. The only ones that were allowed to ripen were the pristine, the early apples. It's because everybody harvested the apples before their time.
Okay.
Sadly.
And not animals.
Not animals, no.
Okay.
These are people who carefully took off the socks, left them on the ground perhaps, and had an apple. Wow. Sorry.
That's so...
I know, it's a little mean.
It is.
Do you have do the orchards have an issue or any issues with animals in general? Or are they
you know what?
They're balanced? Or?
Our major pest is human, I would say, in terms of animals.
You can come back in the picture.
Oh, yeah. Why are you hiding there?
No, I got up to read.
Question.
Okay, the question. Something's going on. I definitely see bubbles there, but I don't know what's going on. Sorry, guys. I'm not very good at Facebook, but...
Yeah.
That's okay. Mainly, Jeff Nielsen was just writing in that he has eaten lots of Honeycrisp apples from his yard right now.
And actually, he grows. I know Jeff. He grows Honeycrisp. And Jeff, tell us the name of the apple that is a relative of Honeycrisp that he absolutely loves.
Oh, okay.
So he mentioned this in the NAFEX group. This is a really wonderful group on Facebook. North American Fruit Explorers. Jeff is amazing. Grows a lot of good stuff. So, Jeff, if you put the name of that other apple cultivar, again, a new one that we haven't heard of before.
And you can put it in Facebook, or you can email us at instudio101@gmail.com as well, because we are also live on the radio.
Cheryl also just says, great seeing Susan on the air.
Hey, that's great.
Live and
Thank you, Cheryl. Nice to see you, too. I'm not really seeing you, but nice to feel you with me.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we could see all the people watching us, we probably wouldn't do this.
I know. Probably wouldn't be. It's like, well, at least we didn't come in our pajamas, guys,
That's
right?
That's right.
So, yeah.
I almost did.
You almost did, yeah. He's got his cool little cactus shirt on, you know.
So now your fans and your show will know what you look like. So what we're going to do is we are going to take this video. And I don't know how the sound is because if you're watching us live on Facebook, you've got the sound from the phone.
Right.
The cell phone. We're going to edit this together so we get the sound of the show from the show. And we're going to edit and we're going to put it on our YouTube. You guys have a YouTube channel?
We do not have a YouTube channel, but we can put it on our Facebook page and possibly even our websites.
So now people will know what you look like.
That's right.
They will love you even more if that's possible.
And it's also because we release ours as a podcast, as you do your show as well, I believe.
Yeah.
So all of our listeners will be able to download that podcast. So you can choose whether you want to listen to it on your phone or you want to watch it on our other sites. So yeah, lots of choice for everybody.
That's right.
That's right. Very good. So...
Yeah.
So we're almost running out of time.
I know. It goes so fast, doesn't it?
It always goes so fast. Does your show go this fast?
You know what? It really does. Yeah. And I have commercial breaks as well. So it's kind of like, whoops, there's the show.
Yes. Yes. Well, I'm glad we didn't have to do that today. And we could go right through. And we gave your own little mini commercial at the beginning.
Yes, I got my mini commercial, which I will pay for later. Thanks, guys.
Well, we got our apples. So
yeah.
That was good. So I think it's important to know... maybe just in the last minute or two. So anybody who wants to place an order for an apple tree and they're going to arrive in the spring. Susan, can you give us a few little quick start tips?
Sure. Okay. So you're going to order your tree. You'll research it. You'll get your fruit tree nursery list and you're going to do your research. And then you get ready for the spring. You learn about what you have to do. So in my book or whatever, you'll read some stuff. You'll learn how to prune the trees. When you get the tree, it'll be shipped to you bare root. You need to plant it right away.
Ooh.
Because if that tree gets warm and the buds break open, it'll die. It has no soil around its roots.
Right.
So you can't put it in the cupboard and forget about it for a week, okay?
Okay.
You keep it somewhere cool and then you plant it right away. And when you plant this tree, it may not have a lot of branches. And in fact, I don't like it when they have a lot of branches. Okay. So what you do is you do your very first pruning cut on the very day you plant your bare root tree.
Ooh.
So let's say my tree looks like a stick, just one stick with no branches. I'll probably cut off the top third, cut right past a bud, and that starts the other buds, activates the other buds.
Oh.
So then the branching starts to happen. It'll start to grow really vigorously, and then from there you will sculpt your tree into the shape it needs to be in order to be a strong fruit-bearing structure.
Excellent.
Very cool.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just say, how big are the trees when you get them? Like, are they?
Could be 6 feet tall,
Oh, really?
wow.
but it could be 4 feet tall. It could be whatever. But you're still
Trying
going
to
to
picture the
cut
mailman
off.
coming to the house.
Yeah,
with that.
well, the mailman will come to the house with a long box.
Okay, and it's not a
Your
hockey
tree is
stick.
in the box, and the roots are going to be wrapped up with maybe damp newspaper or something to keep those roots a little bit damp.
Okay.
Right.
But yeah, that's the first pruning cut. That's when all the activity happens.
Excellent.
You're going to start
Excellent.
things moving.
And because they are disease-resistant trees, they're not going to need, because we can't provide the pesticides of the past, right? They're not going to be reliant on that.
Except that we still have to do other stuff to keep the trees healthy.
Okay.
So just a few tips, it's the fall now.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you do have an apple tree and the fruit has fallen on the ground, clean up the fruit meticulously
Okay.
before the winter. You leave no diseased leaves on the ground, no fruit that's been infested. It's all meticulously cleaned up.
Okay.
Take it away off the site. Do not put it in your compost.
Okay.
Because that's how fruit tree diseases will come back year after year.
Like other garden
Other
issues,
garden
right?
issues, right? You clean up meticulously. So that's another thing. So there are still things you need to do to protect the fruit, but because you hopefully have ordered a disease-resistant tree, and because you're meticulously pruning it every year, which improves health as well, you have good air circulation, you'll have a hopefully healthier tree. Hopefully your soil is good. You're feeding the tree every year.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, actually I had a consultation in a home on Friday, and they have 2 large apple trees.
And how did they look?
They looked good. They were big. There were apples everywhere, though. So they
Yeah.
were definitely on the ground and all
Wow.
over.
So that's the thing.
And they
did
were
you get to
keeping
taste
them.
any?
I did not get to taste any, but a lot of times I visit, and homeowners who've just moved in, especially as this couple had, that's like they're taking it out. Oh, that's not staying, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But these 2 trees were kind of focal points in their yard, and they were going to keep them.
Good. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always really sad when I hear people saying, and this happens a lot, where people say, I have a really bad fruit tree because the fruit tastes really bad. And it's not really the fruit tree that's bad. It's like a child that's badly behaved if it hasn't been nurtured and taught and whatever, you know. So that tree may produce really delicious fruit, but maybe because it's having nutritional challenges and issues,
Right.
Did Jeff answer?
What
He
did
did
Jeff
not.
say?
No,
He did not.
did not
Okay.
answer?
It could be he participated earlier in the show and we didn't know.
Yes, that's okay.